quorum being present, the committee will be in order. The committee is meeting today for consideration of several bills aimed at addressing the evolving threats to our homeland. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, any request for recorded votes may be postponed. Before I discuss the purpose of our business meeting today, I want to take a moment to reflect on the passing of our colleague, Congressman Sylvester Turner. While we will always truly miss him, his decades of public service to the people of Houston and to our nation contribute to his legacy that will endure forever. I extend my prayers and my greatest sympathies to his family, and I recognize the ranking member for any comments that he'd like to make on the unfortunate and untimely passing of Mr. Turner.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And as you've indicated, Mr. Turner was a member of this committee, but a longstanding public servant in the state of Texas, will be missed. But I'd like to also begin by honoring him. Congress Turner's career with the Committee on Homeland Security was all too brief, but he still leaves a legacy. He got a fast start and had already introduced a bill, H.R. 1034, the DHS Cybersecurity On-the-Job Training Program Act, less than a month after joining the committee, picking up where his predecessor, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, had left off. So our hearts are with Representative Turner's family and friends and the entire Houston community he represented as both a state representative and, as I indicated, mayor of the great city of Houston, Texas, before joining us here. May he rest in power, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I think it would be appropriate for us to take a brief moment of silence for the memory of this incredible public servant. Thank you. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning, everyone, and I want to thank my colleagues for being here today. Today's markup reflects our bipartisan commitment to protecting Americans across our great nation from the rapidly evolving threats to our homeland and our way of life. I'm proud of this committee's continued efforts to enhance the Department of Homeland Security's ability to carry out its no-fail mission, defending us from threats both foreign and domestic. Now more than ever, the most pressing foreign threat within our borders is the Chinese Communist Party. As part of its malicious strategy to undermine American power and interest, the CCP has increased its influence over our institutions of higher education for decades. We must dismantle this sinister effort by Beijing to undermine our sovereignty. That's why Chairman of Counterterrorism and Intelligence Subcommittee, Representative Pfluger's bill is so important. H.R. 881 would restrict American taxpayer dollars from funding U.S. colleges and universities that maintain ties with the CCP. Both Beijing and the Iranian regime continue to carry out transnational repression operations on U.S. soil to threaten and harass dissidents. That's why we're considering several bipartisan bills today that will help policymakers expose, assess, and counter threats from malign nation states that target American citizens or lawful permanent residents. This committee is also concerned by increasing sophisticated cyber attacks on our federal networks and critical infrastructure by Chinese-backed threat actors. We must protect our cyber borders. From our drinking water and oil and gas to our telecom networks, Beijing could wreak havoc on services Americans depend on every day. Believe me, the CCP will not hesitate to exploit our vulnerabilities, so we must be ready. I look forward to discussing Representative Ogle's bill that creates an interagency task force to improve coordination among the federal agencies responding to CC-backed cyber bullies, growing threats to U.S. critical infrastructure. This committee is also continuing its important efforts to prevent the tragic loss of American lives from deadly drugs like fentanyl. The Catch Fentanyl Act, introduced by Representative Higgins, would establish a pilot program to test technology enhancements to better detect illicit drugs, currency, and smuggled individuals at land ports of entry. We cannot forget the seriousness, the lingering threats posed by the border crisis. Under the Biden administration, DHS apprehended an unprecedented number of special interest aliens, or SIAs, illegally crossing our borders. These encounters included individuals from adversarial nations like China, Iran, and Russia. Representative Green's bill would require DHS to publish the number of special interest alien encounters each month and deliver much-needed transparency for the American people. Following the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and threats from both ISIS and al-Qaeda resurface in the region, we cannot turn a blind eye to individuals, both on and off U.S. soil, who are increasingly being radicalized to commit violence against Americans, including potentially unvetted individuals who illegally entered the U.S. during the last administration. That's why we are considering a bill led by Representative Luttrell to enhance DHS's counterterrorism efforts in evaluating the threat posed to the United States by individuals in Syria with ties to foreign terrorist organizations. In the wake of the New Year's Day ISIS-inspired terrorist attack in New Orleans, we must do more to address the rising threat vehicular terrorism poses to the homeland. Today, we'll also consider H.R. 1608, introduced by Representative Jimenez, the chair of our Transportation and Maritime Security Subcommittee, which would require DHS to more closely track and report to Congress on those emerging threats and countermeasures related to vehicular ramming attacks. I also urge support for the measures offered by my Democrat colleagues. I appreciate the opportunity to work with them on with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to advance these bills out of the committee. Together, we can fulfill our duty to protect Americans from growing threats to the homeland. Today, we have a unique opportunity to make this country safer and more prosperous than ever. I hope all my colleagues on the committee help us push toward that objective today. I now recognize the ranking member to make an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I, too, look forward to the markup. This markup demonstrates that committed Democrats are more willing to work with Republicans on important homeland security issues. For example, Representative Magaziner and Pfluger have worked productively to find common ground combating transnational repression, and we will advance 3 bipartisan bills to address that threat today. Representative Titus's bill, which is co-sponsored by a member of Republican leadership, Representative Hudson of North Carolina, will authorize the Special Events Program at DHS, which provides support to state, local, tribal, and territorial officials hosting major events like Formula One races or NCAA basketball championships. H.R. 820, sponsored by Representative Swalwell, and 19 bipartisan co-sponsors, including recent mothers, would require TSA to update its security guidance on breast milk, baby formula, and related items to reduce the risk of contamination and make going through airport security checkpoints easier for parents of babies and young children. Supporting parents should be something that we all can get behind. And Representative Poe's measures would ensure that basic training programs for law enforcement at DHS are properly accredited. The hardworking officers and agents at DHS should have the best training possible to respond to their dynamic work environment, and that need should also rise above politics. This bipartisan measure passed the House in the 117th Congress and advanced through this committee last Congress. Bipartisan cooperation has also improved the bills committee Democrats had to oppose last Congress. We will consider today a substitute amendment to the DHS restrictions on Confucius Institute and Chinese Entities of Concern Act, sponsored by Representative Pfluger. As amended, the bill will contain needed language to give strategic flexibility to the Secretary of Homeland Security and prevent academic programs unrelated to national security concerns from being preventing universities from receiving needed DHS funds, like those required after disasters. This kind of bipartisan cooperation, though, stands in the shadow of very dangerous circumstances in our nation. Failed 19th century economic thinking has been brought back from the dead to tank our stock markets and erase trillions and trillions of dollars from our constituents' retirement accounts. To make matters worse, those same outdated ideas are going to drive the cost of living higher for folks back home. Meanwhile, DHS is rounding up innocent people who are in our country legally and sending them to foreign prisons without so much as double-checking the paperwork. When courts require DHS to return those individuals to the United States, they ignore lawful orders and say mistakes are going to happen. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is gutting the department stood up after 9/11 to keep Americans safe. Hundreds of dedicated DHS employees from CISA, FEMA, TSA, and headquarters have been indiscriminately fired, jeopardizing the department's ability to do its jobs. Grants authorized by this committee and funded by legislation we voted for on the House floor are not reaching our states and local communities because of unnecessary freezes that courts have determined are unlawful. And has this committee done the sort of oversight work needed to push back against the Trump administration's mismanagement? Of course not. Yesterday, the Republican majority wanted to look in the rearview mirror and talk about President Biden as if he was still in the Oval Office before canceling a hearing on the former administration's policies. The Republican majority would prefer to trot out its so-called greatest hits instead of dealing with the current crisis brought on by the current administration. They do not want to face the fact that the Trump administration is driving the country into a ditch. The reluctance to face reality is also why the Secretary of Homeland Security has not come before this committee. Mr. Chairman, you have not scheduled a budget hearing with the Secretary for this month like you did last year and the year before. Secretary Mayorkas had been on the job for less than 2 months when he first appeared before the committee when I chaired it in March of 2021. I've asked you on numerous occasions when Secretary Noem will appear before this committee to answer for what has happened at the department on her watch, but my letters have not received replies. And when I asked you at a previous hearing, you said she might come in the fall. That's just not unacceptable. So today, the committee will move the ball downfield on some bipartisan legislation, but it is becoming increasingly hard to work together when Republicans are ignoring how the Trump administration is dismantling our national security and disaster preparedness at the same time. Mr. Chairman, let's do the job the American people sent us here to do. Let's do the job of a co-equal branch of government. Let's get to work, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record, and without objection and by agreement between the chair and the ranking member, the committee shall use an amendment roster today.
Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Reserving the right to object, and I will not, would the chair please explain the agreement regarding the amendment roster? I yield to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman and all committee members for agreeing to the use of an amendment roster. We have agreed that the bills be open to amendment at any point and that we will take up amendments in order listed on the roster. The chair will allow members to offer amendments listed on the roster out of order to the extent practicable and in a manner not prohibited by House or committee rules. Amendments not listed on the roster may be considered at the conclusion of the consideration of the roster.
I thank the chair for his explanation and withdraw any reservation.
Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 275, the Special Interest Alien Reporting Act of 2024. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 275, offered by Ms. Green of Georgia, to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to publish on a monthly basis the number of special interest aliens encountered attempting to unlawfully enter the United States and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. I now recognize Ms. Green for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment in the nature of the substitute.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 275, offered by Ms. Green of Georgia.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with and the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered base text for the purpose of further amendment. The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes on her amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Biden administration created one of the most damaging national security threats our country has ever faced. They allowed over 12 million illegals from over 170 countries and territories to break our laws, invade our country, rape our women and children, and murder our own people. Now Democrats are fighting against the Trump administration, fighting against deportations of people who broke our laws, who are members of the cartel, and they're protesting every single day for these cartel members to be brought back in America, which is a national security risk. 2 million of these illegals that the Biden administration and Democrats welcomed into the country are known gotaways who completely evaded U.S. authorities and are roaming the interior of the United States. Included in these 12 million are special interest aliens, also known as SIAs. Special interest aliens are individuals who pose a potential national security risk to the United States, typically from a nation that promotes terrorist activity or harbors terrorists. Under the Biden-Harris administration, there were at least 1.7 million special interest aliens from 26 countries encountered at our border. This does not include the potential SIAs among the 2 million known gotaways. I say at least because the true scope of how many SIAs remains largely unknown, since DHS is not required to disclose this critical information publicly. The American people deserve to know how many potential terrorists are coming across the border and which countries they are from, which is exactly what my bill does. And I can't imagine how anybody across the aisle can even argue with this. According to the former Chief Border Patrol agent of the San Diego sector, prior to the Biden-Harris administration, the sector averaged only 10 to 15 SIAs arrests per year. He testified, once word was out that the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more that this year. And that's the ones that they knew of. The number of special interest aliens skyrocketed over the last 4 years, and even more egregiously, the Biden administration tried to cover it up. The administration of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Secretary Mayorkas, impeached by the House, by the way, told the chief's Border Patrol agent of the San Diego sector that he was prohibited from releasing any of this information on the increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests at the time. That's unbelievable. The administration tried to convince the public that there was no threat at the border. They were complicit in covering up the invasion at our border. The American people deserve to know the number of potential terrorists Kamala Harris and Joe Biden allowed to come in the United States. They also deserve to know the numbers under the Trump administration to see a president who cares about the American people secure the border. That is why I'm urging the support for my legislation, which would require DHS to publicly release information each month on the number of SIA encounters, as well as countries of origin. Thankfully, President Trump has secured our border and restored our nation's sovereignty. Given the number of border crossings is down 94%, border crossings are down 94%, down to the lowest monthly levels ever recorded. I have no doubt that under his leadership SIA encounters will cease if they haven't already. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields. Would anyone care to comment on the amendment? I recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I oppose H.R. 275, the Tipping Off Terrorist Act, because it would provide terrorists, cartels, and other bad actors with real-time information about who's getting additional screening at our borders. It would essentially give them the inside track every month on DHS's screening practices, and focus, since it is considered special interest, shifts regularly according to the threat landscape. Democrats went to San Diego. We heard from the professionals last weekend about many of these issues, and one of the things we did learn is their protocols need to be kept a secret in order to be effective. So if we're going to publish these special interest aliens, then that tells cartels how they need to move people from other countries to here. So, Mr. Chairman, these bad actors attempt to circumvent enhanced screening critical to the keeping of our nation's safety. This would make our communities less safe. House Democrats do not oppose increased transparency about encounters along our borders. However, we believe that DHS shouldn't release data that puts our national security at risk. Therefore, I encourage Representative Green and my Republican colleagues to work with the Trump administration to determine what information can be safely published without putting national security at risk. The Trump administration can and should then publish that information. But for us to require that by law, they can do it already right now. So I encourage you to use your influence with the administration to publish certain information, but that information should not damage national security like the current law is proposed. At any time, the Trump administration can choose to publish the data it wants. I urge my colleagues to vote against this unnecessary measure that jeopardizes homeland security. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Would anyone else care to make comments? Mr. Crayer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me thank my colleague from Georgia for this legislation. I share with you our common concern about terrorism attacking our country, putting our citizens in harm's way. I think the job our agents have, DHS, of finding terrorists is like finding a needle in a haystack. It's an impossible job, but they've got to do it. I remember here, when I first got here, our first Secretary of Homeland Security was General Kelly, who testified in front of us. And he would often say that border security does not end or begin at the border. It just, a lot of other things go into border security. And we would usually talk about things, for example, a travel manifest that is shared with us from other countries like Brazil, knowing who is coming into our hemisphere and who to watch out for. Subsequent to that, I've been working on this issue. I've had the opportunity to go to our targeting center right outside of Washington, D.C., to talk to the folks that actually follow terrorists. And it's interesting because they're working with limited resources, yet they're following people that may have been on a terror list from Colombia 50 years ago when Colombia had a civil war. Under that category, President Petros is considered a terrorist. We want to focus on individuals that we know will do us harm. The other comment I found later on, or have heard at the border, is that if you're a real serious terrorist, you're probably not going to walk across the border. You're going to fly into the U.S., which is exactly what happened in 9/11. Those terrorists we're here legally. I share with you, my colleague from Georgia, our interest in making sure the homeland is secure. I want to make sure we focus on the issues like giving our targeting center more resources, coordinate more of our knowledge and information with our allies around the world. After all, we got to make sure that the other side does not scorn us at all. Any successful attack on the homeland would be tragic for all of us. Appreciate your effort. I will not be supporting you today, but I look forward to working with you and coming up with a solution to this issue, which is of interest to all of us. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield.
Gentleman yields. I yield myself 5 minutes for a few comments and questions, and I actually am going to yield to Ms. Green but I want to ask a couple of questions. As I understand it from looking at your bill, this just publishes the numbers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'll reclaim my time. Does it report any protocols on how these gentlemen or women that are on this list are questioned? Any? No.
No.
Is it any protocols on how they're identified and detained?
No,
Okay. So it just publishes the pure numbers. Is that correct? Just making sure.
just tells the American people how many SIAs have come into the country.
Does it report their names?
No.
Okay. All right. I yield. Is there anybody else who wants to make a comment about this? Mr. Goldman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's actually a lot of ground for common bipartisan effort here. I can assure all of my colleagues that the immigration issue is top of mind, that Democrats are very concerned about whether there are convicted criminals who remain in this country, and because of our immigration laws, including the fact that a country has to be willing to take someone who is removed in order for that person to be removed. There certainly are lots of things that we can address here. Our national security is at a very perilous point. The fact that we are seeing such egregious breaches of security clearance, classified information that warrant members of governments of other countries to start to say they're going to reevaluate their intelligence sharing with us should give everyone in this room serious pause about how we are tackling national security. Now, publishing the number of SIAs, it may be nice for to talk about. It may certainly, the transparency is something that we support, but it does nothing to ultimately secure our homeland. And I wish we were spending a lot more time on efforts to shore up our classified information, to shore up our relationships with our allies who provide us with intelligence information so that we can stop a terrorist attack, a real terrorist attack, not a terrorist attack based on alleged accusations of terrorism by members of this committee or members of the White House. You see, you aren't actually a terrorist just because a member of Congress from Georgia says you are. There actually has to be evidence provided to support that. That's how our country works. That's how due process works. That's how the rule of law works. Is the president doesn't get to determine that someone is or is not a terrorist. Members of Congress don't get to determine whether someone is or is not a terrorist. But that does not seem to be something that some of my colleagues understand. There's a reason why we have due process in this country, and you may think that due process is not warranted for someone who is not a citizen of this country, or you may think that due process is not warranted for someone who's accused of being a member of a Venezuelan gang or terrorist organization. But once you start going down that slippery slope, then our basic foundations of due process come undone entirely. And I don't understand what the problem is with allowing a neutral arbiter based on evidence to determine whether someone is a terrorist or not. What is the objection that this administration has to presenting evidence to a judge to say, this is the evidence that this person is a member of a particular cartel? What we've seen in one particular case that is top of mind right now is that there's a confidential informant who has said that someone was a member of a foreign gang, a foreign terrorist organization now designated, and that he wore a particular type of baseball hat. There's no corroboration. There's nothing else to corroborate or to confirm what that confidential informant says, at least that has been presented. And I know there are some lawyers on the other side, some former prosecutors on the other side of the aisle who, like me, would never, ever present to a judge a non-corroborated statement from a confidential informant as the basis for establishing anything. And so we're a little off topic, but I did feel I need to address my colleague from Georgia's comments about all of the alleged terrorists who are there are those who are supporting them to stay in. Nobody is supporting any member of a foreign gang to stay in here. We would just like to make sure that people are adjudicated and determined to be a member of a foreign gang by someone other than the President of the United States or a member of Congress. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Guest for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would like to yield as much of my time as she may consume to Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Ladies recognized.
Thank you. I think my colleague across the aisle is very confused and maybe uneducated and uninformed of what a special interest alien is. SIA is a non-U.S. person who is based on an analysis of travel patterns, potentially poses a national security risk to the United States or its interest. Special interest aliens are people from countries identified by the United States government as having conditions that promote or protect terrorism or potentially pose some sort of national security threat to the United States. It's hard for me to fathom that anyone on this committee would be opposed to simply reporting the number of special interest aliens that Homeland, that our great men and women that served as Border Patrol agents, that any of our police, any of our ICE agents happen to detain, and it's just the number. We're just telling the American people how many. That's it.
Would the gentlelady yield for a
No,
question?
I will not yield. The Department of Homeland Security officials have publicly posted information about special interest aliens in the past, including the current Border Patrol chief and his predecessor. Custom and Border Protection already published similar numbers on its public site. For example, the terrorist screening data set. And just to go further, and this is always an interesting dynamic to me. On our side of the aisle, we trust the American people, and we believe they deserve transparency. They deserved the truth from the federal government, because it is, after all, that we swore an oath to serve the American people. And the American people are the taxpayers that pay all of our paychecks. They pay for this building. They fund this government, even though the government has plunged them into $36 trillion in debt and opened up the borders for the past 4 years and allowed it to be flooded with illegal aliens. And then the Biden administration gave them Social Security numbers. You see, this that we are trying to pass today, and we would love to have your participation. We would enjoy and really would thank you for caring about transparency and providing information to the American people that so deserve it. instead of arguing back and forth and watching you all defend special interest aliens, defend terrorists who have come in our country, and defend dangerous, violent cartels who have been deported out of our country. I know too many people that have been murdered by cartels. I know too many people, and I know their families, and have watched them mourn because they have a family member that was killed by illegal alien crimes or murdered by an illegal alien or a cartel member. This should be a simple conversation. We are all Americans, and we serve this country, not foreign countries. And that should be a simple fact that we can all recognize, not have political disagreements about. Congress, by the way, has previously released information as it relates to special interest aliens through hearings and committee reports, including the October 3rd, 2024 report from the House Judiciary Committee titled The Biden-Harris Border Crisis, at least 1.7 million potential national security threats. DHS has an obligation to the American people to be as transparent as possible. We owe it to the American people to be as transparent as possible. This is not targeting some innocent migrant or someone that is seeking to be a citizen of the United States. We're talking about special interest aliens, potentially terrorists, people who are linked to terrorist organizations, people who share their travel patterns, people that all of us should not want in the United States, and the American people don't want them here either. This isn't giving their name. This isn't telling what country they're from. This isn't giving their address. This isn't saying where they work. This isn't saying anything. It's not showing their picture. It's simply saying how many came across the border each month. It's very simple, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields. All right. So let me just say this. I want us to all debate this, but let's debate the bill as much as we can. I get it that we want to make comments about what's going on, but let's debate the bill, please. Mr. Fentanyl, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Green. And I want to yield the rest of my time to Honorable Ranking Member Thompson.
Ranking Member, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you asked very simple questions about, does this bill only require numbers? And the author of the bill said yes. But that's not what this bill does. It requires other information more than numbers. Now, when this bill was offered last time by Ms. Green, we tried to get her to accept numbers, and she didn't. Now she comes back with a different bill and tries to say it meant what we tried to get her to do last time. So clearly, the maker of the bill is not where it needs to be. I read the language that's in the bill. It says such numbers disaggregated by geographic regions of such encounters. Specifications related to whether such encounters were made at land, air, or seaports of entry, between ports of entry, or in the interior of the United States. Identification of any such nationalities or countries of last habitual residence that was covered nations. So in other words, it's not a number. You got to tell where they came from and all of this. And for the record, special interest aliens come to this country all the time. It's not illegal. So for whatever reason, we are conflating other issues with this. The department has the capacity right now to use its discretion in reporting this without this legislation. So all we're saying is, if it's numbers, will the maker of the amendment accept the fact that it only requires numbers, no country of origin or any other information as specified, and Democrats will agree to it. But it's not just a numbers bill. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Would anyone else care? Mr. Jimenez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be voting for the bill, but I'm not sure it goes far enough for me. And so I'm probably going to be introducing some legislation that talks about historicals too, because the only way that we can determine whether there's been improvement in the southern border on this is what happened prior to this administration. And so I'm going to try to get numbers about special interest aliens entering unlawfully, we're trying to enter unlawfully into the United States during the Biden administration and what's happened now during the Trump administration, and compare those numbers and see, if there's been an improvement. Because really that's what we want to do as a committee, to make sure that there's improvement in the security of the United States. Ms. Green, I'll be voting for your bill, but I know that I'm going to be proffering something different for historical data and see the differences between the two administrations. Excuse me? Yes, I will.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Jimenez, I think it's a great idea. I would just say that the more numbers we have, probably the better. We can show some kind of a pattern. The biggest attack we've had in the homeland was 9/11. It'd be interesting to go back a couple of decades to find out if there are any patterns here in terms of travel, terrorists, how they got in, and then we can have a good picture, putting the partisanship aside and focusing on national security.
So that sounds like a
Thank you.
bipartisan bill forthcoming. I like it.
Thank you. And with that, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the spirit of transparency and the efforts to measure. I say this a lot in Spanish, what's not measured cannot be improved. I do have issues with this bill because of what the ranking member has said. Making a lot of this information public might have the opposite effect of what we're intending. If our goal is national security, if our goal is protecting the border, telling the SIAs where we are intercepting them and letting them know, hey, we're stronger here than here, might actually lead to the opposite intended effect. I also share the concerns of the ranking member when they say that this just publishes as numbers. I mean, Section 2A3 says, identification of any such nationalities or countries of last habitual residence. So when I heard Ms. Green say that it does not mention where they're from, I think that is entirely inaccurate. And so for those reasons, I will be voting against. Now, I don't know if anyone
gentleman
would
yield?
like- Yes.
You're recognized.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize what my colleague from Puerto Rico said. It would be one thing if it were just numbers. Then, if it were just numbers, we'd be talking about transparency to the American people, and realistically, it would have no impact on whether or not our homeland is safe, because we're not asking the department to gather more information on people. We're not asking them to do anything differently than what they're already doing to keep our homeland safe. This, of course, is not numbers. And the problem not just numbers, the problem is when you're adding in public reporting, there is a benefit to transparency for the American people. I fully agree with that. But there's also a tremendous benefit to the organized gangs who are trying to infiltrate our country. And I appreciate the lesson that Ms. Green was trying to pass on to me, but as somebody who prosecuted organized criminal enterprises for 10 years, I can tell you that this kind of information only helps the enemy. It does not stop them. And it's bad enough that you're misrepresenting what your bill says, but it's even worse than the fact that the information that's being provided will help the enemy and will do nothing to help keep our homeland secure. So I wish that, A, we had an accurate representation from the sponsor of this bill as to what it is, and B, that if it were actually that, we'd be having a very different discussion. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Luttrell, you're recognized.
I do, and I feel like this has come completely off the rails. Dan, I'm going to chat with you. I disagree. I think if countries are well aware and under the microscope and they know that we see them, that puts them in a different posture. Now, my colleague stated it was numbers. I don't understand. If she would have stated numbers in countries of origin, and DHS is the one that's doing the processing, as they have done currently and in the past, this just codifies legislation that says this is something that Congress wants. And it's not Congress, it's not Morgan that's down there pointing people out, saying, hey, look, you're obviously an SIA. It's us assisting DHS in amplifying our ability to defend ourselves. So I guess my question is the problem with, should it be just numbers, or why is it a problem with its numbers, countries of origin, where we're letting the American people like, hey, we are very well aware of the problem set. We are laser focused in on these areas. And I personally think that's a good thing. I yield.
Yeah, well,
Gentleman yield.
I think first of all, I think we have to distinguish between foreign governments and foreign terrorist organizations,
Okay.
who are often different.
Will you yield? Okay, I forced
Your time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forced you. Okay,
Reclaim your time.
okay. Forgive my speech if I don't say, I mean the terrorist organizations that we are focused on, not specific governments and so on, or if that's included.
Right. Well,
And I know you're going to go granular on me here.
I'm not going to go granular because I think that you have to recognize a foreign terrorist organization is a professional criminal organization. They assume that they are under surveillance. They assume that they are being investigated, that they are being targeted. So by releasing the information that there is actual targeting of them does not give them any information that they don't already know. You're not gonna be able to say, oh, wow, they're looking at us now. We better be more careful. But what they are gonna get is...
That's exactly what will happen.
But they already know that. And what they will then learn is not anything that not any surprise that they're being investigated. They will actually learn how we are investigating and targeting them, which allows for them
I disagree. They will just know through the publication.
So
I'm sorry.
what we don't want to do is you just reclaim your time. So to members, all the members committee, right and left, I mean, if it's your time, you can reclaim your time.
Yeah,
So if you're reclaiming your time, it's yours.
okay, no, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we're not going to, this isn't a debate.
Well, my
Yield
frustration is
back
we're
or-
talking about a piece of legislation here, and it has come off the rails, so now our Democratic colleagues are totally against the Republican colleagues, and now we're in a fist fight in the middle of the committee, which...
No, we're not. They're making their points and you're making your points. That's what it is. But you have to do it by the rules of the committee.
Trust me, I would never want a fist fight.
yeah, all right. And I hate to say it, hang on, I reclaim. I just think...
All right, the order. You have a minute and 22 seconds, Mr. Luttrell.
I hate to think that we have gotten lost in the actual legislation that I personally think promotes good information to the American public and Congress. And I understand your perspective, sir, but as a former member of the military that did this for a living, putting them back on their heels and understanding that we're aggressively coming at them makes their tactics, techniques, and procedures fail. And then they have to start completely over. And then we continue to maneuver.
Would the gentleman yield for
Yes.
one comment? We are in agreement on this, that figuring out effective measures to put these organizations on their heels is critical. And that is where the department's energy should be placed, not on disclosing in various forms information that they already have, that they could publish if they thought that were effective counter surveillance and effective investigation, but instead to essentially create busy work that, yes, I'm sure the American people have an interest in this, but I don't think that the American people's interest in this will have an impact on keeping our homeland safer. So I would love to work on other ways of targeting these foreign terrorist organizations so that we can actually put them on their heels. This bill doesn't do that.
Yeah. I yield back, sir. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else want to say a word?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Higgins?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time to the chairman.
Thank you. Again, I spent a number of years in a Tier 1 task force hunting terrorists. And I'll tell you, they don't like the bag count. Right? They hate it. It's a disincentive. If you put the numbers up, the scoreboard up, it's a disincentive. It's not an incentive. It doesn't publish any kind of how we're catching them. To push back on this bill is really, I don't understand it at all. And I hunted terrorists as a part of a Tier 1 task force for years. No, I didn't prosecute them. I hunted them to capture them, and in some cases, kill them. So from my experience, putting the number count up is going to be a disincentive. It's not giving them some ability to evade our detection in any way. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Goldman recognized that they probably know it when we get them. Good. Let's remind them. Let's tell them every day, hey, we're catching more of you guys. And let's also let the American people know. And as I understand this bill, it would apply to Republican administrations and Democrat administrations, because it's a law. So I don't get it, but that's me. And I think, Mr. Jimenez, I'll yield to you since I have a little bit of time. If Mr. Higgins...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reclaiming my time, I yield to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you to the gentleman from Louisiana. I just want to clarify something. Actually, what I wanted in this bill is actually in the bill already. So in the amendment, the first report required under subsection shall also include matters described in the subsection for the period from January 20th, 2021 to January 19th, 2025. So what I really wanted was this comparison. It was already in the amendment, so I'm good. And I yield back.
Thank you. Reclaiming my time. I yield to Mr. Knott.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Knott, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the remainder to Ms. Green, but one of the things that I think that we're trying to flesh out here, there obviously is a component that says the report shall include the overall numbers, the net numbers, but there's also line 17 of the draft I have, each report shall also include the following, and that's where it lists the geographic regions of such encounters, the specifications relating to whether such encounters were made in various areas of the country, and then the identification of any such nationalities or countries of last habitual residence. I'll yield to Ms. Green to explain why that is shall as opposed to may.
Reclaiming my time, yield to Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Thank you, Mr. Knott. I think it's extremely important that it does include this information, and that's why it's written that way. And I have to say that I'm honored to serve on a committee with multiple members here on this committee that have served our country and tracked down and hunted terrorists. That's something that I can't understand in my life experience, but I respect and I am immensely grateful for. And so are the American people. And to hear my colleagues who have done this as a job while they left their families in service to our country to defend the United States of America and protect us from terrorism and terrorists abroad, when they are completely comfortable with this information being released for transparency for the American people, I think that should give everyone full confidence that this is the right thing to do. This does not threaten our national security interest. It is, as a matter of fact, it keeps us safer. And I'm thankful for the comments and the expertise that has been said today on our committee. And Mr. Higgins, I yield back.
Reclaiming my time, and I thank the gentleman from North Carolina. I didn't want to recognize him as Representative Brad. So thank you for clarifying the spelling and the pronunciation of your name, sir. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to make a comment on the bill or on the amendment? Mr. McKenzie, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually appreciate the debate that we're having here today. This is the type of work that this committee should be doing. And we are considering very serious legislation, not just in this bill, but a lot of the bills that we're going to be talking about today that do have implications about our national security. And I think we as members of Congress and also the American people know that we are in a very vulnerable situation right now when we are facing not only foreign entities, but also the cartels, the terrorist organizations, all of these non-governmental entities that want to do harm to the American people and to our country. And this debate that we're having around the type of transparency and information that we want to have about what is going on at our border is a great discussion to have. Now, I disagree with my colleague from New York who said that this does not help national security and it puts us in a more vulnerable position, because I think the cartels, in my experience, being down at the border, like so many members of the committee have done, a lot of us have traveled there, but in talking to our law enforcement, they know that the cartels in many instances have already better information than we do about what is going on in the security of that border. And so I think that more transparency, more information is a good thing for not only the American people, but also those of us that are members of Congress that are going to be making decisions about where we should be moving resources, where we should be funding additional border security. And I think this legislation does that. And so, again, I appreciate everybody's input, everybody's thoughts today, but I would respectfully disagree with, again, the colleague from New York who is leading the charge against this legislation. I would support my colleague from Georgia and her initiative to pass this legislation, because, again, I think we all want more security, more transparency about what is going on at our border. This legislation does that, and really it's just the first step in helping us attack the challenges that are coming at America every single day. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, the question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mrs. Green. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Chair,
Recorded vote is requested. So there's no motion from the ranking member. The question is now on reporting the bill H.R. 275 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Mr. Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McCall. Mr. Higgins. Mr. Guest. Mr. Guest votes aye. Mr. Jimenez. Mr. Jimenez votes aye. Mr. Pfluger. Mr. Pfluger votes aye. Mr. Garbarino. Ms. Green of Georgia. Ms. Green of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Luttrell votes aye. Mr. Strong. Mr. Strong votes aye. Mr. Burkeen. Mr. Burkeen votes aye. Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane votes aye. Mr. Ogles. Mr. Ogles votes aye. Mrs. Biggs. Mrs. Biggs votes aye. Mr. Evans of Colorado. Mr. Evans votes aye. Mr. McKenzie. Mr. McKenzie votes aye. Mr. Knott. Mr. Knott votes aye. Ranking Member Thompson.
Nay.
Ranking Member Thompson votes no. Mr. Swalwell. Mr. Correa. No. Mr. Correa votes no. Mr. Tanadar.
No.
Mr. Tanadar votes no. Mr. Magaziner.
No.
Mr. Magaziner votes no. Mr. Goldman.
No.
Mr. Goldman votes no. Mrs. Ramirez.
No.
Mrs. Ramirez votes no. Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Kennedy votes no. Mrs. McIver.
No.
Mrs. McIver votes no. Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson votes no. Mr. Hernandez?
No.
Mr. Hernandez votes no. Ms. Poe? Mr. Carter? Mr. Carter votes no. Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia votes no.
Are there other members in the room who wish to have their vote recorded?
How am I recorded?
Mr. Higgins is not recorded.
Higgins votes aye.
Mr. Higgins votes aye.
How am I recorded?
The chairman is not recorded.
Chairman votes aye.
Chairman Green votes aye.
Clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 15 ayes and 12 noes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 1569, the Catch Fentanyl Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1569, offered by Mr. Higgins of Louisiana, to establish a pilot program to assess the use of technology to speed up and enhance the cargo inspection process at land ports of entry along the border.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. It's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My bill, H.R. 1569, the Contraband Awareness Technology Catches Harmful Fentanyl Act, CATCH Act. Trump administration supports this bill. Republicans support this bill, and I encourage my Democrat colleagues to support the bill. In fact, many of my colleagues across the aisle, in a bipartisan effort to help us work together to secure our border, do indeed support this bill, and I thank them for their support. The Trump administration has made incredible strides to reinstate sovereignty over our borders, leading to some of the lowest numbers of border encounters ever seen. With new technologies, we can and we will improve on our mission for efficiency through the reduction of wait times for commercial traffic and our goal of more effectively screening and intercepting illegal drugs like fentanyl. While new executive efforts against cartel smuggling have been effective, we have to remember that our adversaries, the cartels, are creative and highly motivated to find ways around our systems. This is their business. This is their business model. This is their livelihood. They've made billions upon billions of dollars running drugs into our country, and they will not just go away quietly. Thankfully, our nation thrives on innovation, and we have technology to counter the cartel's drug trafficking. With this legislation, we can ensure that that technology is placed on the front lines to battle the cartels. The pilot program created under this bill would further empower CBP to test and evaluate new technologies for deployment at U.S. ports of entry, with the ultimate goal of improving the efficiency and enhancing the effectiveness of our cargo screening process. Congress, in the past, has invested in non-intrusive inspection technology at our ports. However, today, still only a fraction of commercial trucks, passenger vehicles, and sea containers are scanned using the technology available to us due to issues with logistics and lack of integrated systems. Last September, for instance, CBP officers at a single port of entry seized over 1.5 million fentanyl pills, with 1 million of those pills seized in a single vehicle. How many other vehicles are carrying fentanyl at that level across our border, we'll never know. Tragically, we'll never know. But the answer should be zero, because we have the technology to close that gap, and that's what this bill does. I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, too numerous to name, Mr. Chairman, but many Democrat and Republican colleagues have joined in support of this bill, and I encourage its passage through committee and to be brought to the floor and signed into law. I yield.
The gentleman yields. Does anyone wish to speak on the bill?
Chairman.
Mr. Magaziner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to be the Democratic lead of the Catch Fentanyl Act, the bill that we're considering now. The U.S. is battling a severe opioid and addiction crisis, with fentanyl the leading cause of deaths. Over the last 5 years, more than 250,000 Americans have died from a fentanyl overdose. In Rhode Island, my home state, fentanyl continues to drive the overdose epidemic, with more than 500 deaths annually in our small state. That's thousands of empty seats around the dinner table. That is thousands of families who are never going to get to hug their loved ones again. This is a crisis, and it needs to be met with a whole of government effort. Stopping the flow of fentanyl will save lives and disrupt criminal organizations. And this bill will direct the Department of Homeland Security to establish pilot projects to use new and emerging technologies in our common fight against fentanyl trafficking. These pilots will use artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, and other emerging technologies to stop more fentanyl at the border. We can improve our detection and our disruption of the flow of fentanyl by leaning into what America does best, that's innovating and working together. So I want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. This bill passed out of committee in both the House and the Senate last year. We are hoping that this year, because we're getting an earlier start on it, that we'll be able to get it all the way to the finish line on the floor. So thank you all very much to my colleagues on both sides, and I urge passage as well.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Knott for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Higgins, the other co-sponsor, I'd love to ask a question if I may, and I'd be happy to yield afterwards. Do you see any utility in expanding the pilot program into the country's interior, whether it be the use of detection, enhanced screening, et cetera, once the products, cargo, trucks?
Gentleman, yield for an answer?
Yes, sir.
There's nothing that prohibits the use of the technology in the interior if it's operated by CBP.
Gentleman yields.
Yes, sir. What about in terms of expanding beyond just the CBP, whether it's HSI, ATF, DEA, task force, et cetera?
That would be a DHS executive decision.
Gentleman yields. It's time. You yield.
I yield
Okay.
back.
Gentleman yields. Would anyone else care to speak on the bill? Here, Mr. Goldman.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to briefly speak to say that I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. This is the type of, I think, substantive bipartisan work we can do that actually addresses the issues at the border, and I thank Mr. Higgins and Mr. Magaziner for working together to bring this in front of us.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Okay. Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 1569, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 1508, the DHS Special Events Program and Support Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1508, offered by Ms. Titus, to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to authorize a program to assess the threat, vulnerability, and consequences of terrorism or other security threats as appropriate to certain events and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, is recognized for 5 minutes on the measure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to offer H.R. 1508, the bipartisan DHS Special Events Program and Support Act, on behalf of our former committee colleague, Congresswoman Dina Titus of Nevada. H.R. 1508 authorizes the Special Event Assessment Rating Program, known as the SEER program within DHS. As we can all attest, shared activities in our communities help to create togetherness. Communities in the United States host every day, ranging in scale from varsity baseball games to national cherry blossom festival parades. Being able to safely assemble at community events is foundational to the United States. And this bill authorizes DHS to help ensure this is possible. The DHS Special Events Program and Support Act would permanently codify DHS's Syria system, under which DHS assesses the risk to and potentially provide security support for special events. For events that receive a rating of 1 or 2, like the Super Bowl or the World Cup matches in the U.S., the Secretary of Homeland Security appoints a federal coordinating team. For more than 20 years, federal law enforcement has worked to evaluate potential threats to special events across the country and partner with state, local, tribal, and territorial officials to ensure safe experiences. Some of the bill's national supporters include the U.S. Travel Association, the National Emergency Management Association, the International Association of Emergency Managers, and the National Football League. I thank my colleagues for supporting this bipartisan measure that works to provide the best protection for all of the major events that Americans enjoy across the country, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Hearing none, are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 1508, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 2158, the Countering Transnational Repression Act of 2025. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2158, offered by Mr. Pfluger, to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to authorize a dedicated transnational repression working group within the Department of Homeland Security to analyze and monitor transnational repression and terrorism threats related to transnational repression and for other purpose.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of H.R. 2158, the Countering Transnational Repression Act, and underscore the threat that transnational repression poses to our nation's sovereignty. Transnational repression is when a foreign government targets critics outside of its borders to silence dissent, intimidate, or punish dissent. And tactics can range from violence, assassination, threats, harassment, intimidation, and smear campaigns, and are often directed at political dissidents, journalists, and other members of the diaspora communities. We've heard from many victims of transnational repression here on this committee, and they include very troublesome testimony from folks like Dr. Bob Fu, who is a constituent in Midland, Texas, who's been targeted on U.S. soil by the Chinese Communist Party. And in fact, the Chinese Communist Party, the Iranian regime, and other malign entities have reached into American soil to silence American citizens and residents who defend human rights and advocate for free speech. These unacceptable acts of hostility are a direct challenge to our sovereignty, the rule of law, and the U.S. government must respond to defend our homeland. That's why I'm proud to lead H.R. 2158, which would establish a dedicated transnational repression working group within DHS. This group would monitor and assess transnational repression and related terrorism threats, enabling DHS to take proactive measures to prevent such activities. A proactive approach is crucial and especially urgent considering the CCP's repressive activities, which include an illegal pseudo-police station in New York City that the Justice Department says was used to monitor and intimidate dissidents. I want to thank my colleagues and especially Mr. Magaziner for working in a very bipartisan way. We have had multiple hearings at the subcommittee level and a markup at the subcommittee level to address this challenge. That's exactly what this committee was formed to do. With that, I yield back and urge support.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 2158, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 2116, the Law Enforcement Support and Counter Transnational Repression Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2116, offered by Mr. Evans of Colorado, to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to conduct a law enforcement support and counter transnational repression public service announcement campaign and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Thompson, for leading this markup and for consideration of my bill, H.R. 2116, the Law Enforcement Support and Counter-Transnational Repression Act. I'm proud to work alongside Mr. Pfluger and Mr. Magaziner to bring attention to the threats that transnational repression poses to refugee and immigrant communities throughout the United States and across the globe. Many Americans and local law enforcement officials have never even heard of the term transnational repression, and that is precisely what I hope to change with this bill. Authoritarian regimes and malicious organizations use a wide range of tactics to intimidate and coerce members of their diaspora communities outside their borders and on U.S. soil, and these victims often don't know where to turn to help. So to counter these threats, my bill is three-pronged. It instructs DHS to create a public service announcement campaign to educate the public on the growing threat of transnational repression. It expands access to the FBI's transnational repression hotlines for victims in our diaspora communities. And it equips boots on the ground state and local law enforcement officials with the necessary tools to prosecute perpetrators and stop our biggest adversaries from harming people on U.S. soil with attempts to suppress free speech and diminish the rule of law. As a former police officer for over a decade in Colorado, my #1 goal every day was to protect my community from harm. And in my current role in Congress, public safety is still my biggest priority, and I rely heavily on the experiences of my constituents to identify where to step in and help. This bill will empower victims to step out of the shadows. It builds community relationships with law enforcement so these reports can happen, and that ultimately law enforcement can protect victims from transnational repression. I encourage all my colleagues to support this effort to counter transnational repression and help our diaspora communities pursue the American dream without fear of retaliation from the people and places that they've fled, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Hearing none, are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 2116, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 2139, the Strengthening State and Local Efforts to Counter Transnational Repression Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2139, offered by Mr. Magaziner, to amend the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to prioritize strengthening of state and local law enforcement capabilities to combat transnational repression and terrorism threats related to transnational repression and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Chairman. Repressive foreign governments are increasingly reaching beyond their own borders to target those exercising their free speech in our country. Journalists, activists, and political dissidents in the United States should not fear for their lives while on U.S. soil. These individuals are targeted in person or online for their bravery to speak out against repressive governments and their abuses. Targeted individuals are often subject to harassment, surveillance, and even violence. In March last month, 2025, the Department of Justice convicted 2 agents of the Iranian government in a murder-for-hire plot. Last October, we also learned of a foiled plot by an Indian government employee to assassinate a U.S. citizen and outspoken critic of the Iranian government in New York City. Last January, at our subcommittee, we heard from witnesses like Bob Fu and Enes Kanter Freedom about their firsthand experiences and how they were targeted in the United States by foreign governments attempting to silence them for their beliefs. Now, what used to be a rare form of foreign intervention and intimidation has become, unfortunately, a common and daily assault on people all over the world, including here in America. So my bill will ensure that state and local law enforcement get the training they need to identify, pursue, and investigate transnational repression in the communities they serve. State and local law enforcement are often the eyes and ears best suited to identify and disrupt transnational repression, but they need the training in order to recognize it and know how to understand what's going on and disrupt it. Under this bill, the Department of Homeland Security will establish a transnational repression training program for state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement agencies, including through fusion centers. It requires that the training include how to identify transnational repression, what information should be collected and retained, how to identify targets and victims, and best practices for victim safety. It will also require training be implemented in a manner that upholds privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties concerns. And I'll just say, as Chairman Pfluger noted, this is part of a bipartisan package of bills that we worked on together. His bill, my bill, Representative Evans' bill, working together on a bipartisan basis to put together a really good complementary package of these three bills to address the issue of transnational repression in a holistic way. I want to thank them, along with Representative Goldman, Representative Swalwell, who have also been involved throughout this process and are co-sponsors as well. This is a really good example of bipartisan cooperation on a serious issue. And I'll just say we had a markup at the subcommittee level. These bills passed unanimously with support from both sides, and I ask my colleagues to support them again today to make our country safer, enhance our homeland security, and strengthen our reputation as a country, as a place where all viewpoints are welcomed and tolerated. So thank you, and I yield back.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Goldman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Magaziner, Mr. Pfluger, Mr. Evans for bringing this bipartisan package of bills addressing transnational repression. This is particularly relevant and important in my district, where the CCP had created a secret police station in New York City to conduct surveillance of Chinese nationals who were in the United States. And that example brings a real-world story to what we're trying to address here. And I would ask unanimous consent to introduce December 18th, 2024 Associated Press article titled "Manhattan Man Pleads Guilty to Helping Establish Secret Chinese Police Station in NYC." This is an example of how the cooperation between federal, state, local levels to fight transnational repression can protect those who are in America trying to escape from repressive regimes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm grateful to be a co-sponsor of this and to address this critical issue. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Would anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 2139, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 881, the DHS Restrictions on Confucius Institutes and Chinese Entities of Concern Act. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 881, offered by Mr. Pfluger, to establish Department of Homeland Security funding restrictions on institutions of higher education that have a relationship with Confucius Institutes and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and it is considered read and open to amendment at any point. I now recognize Mr. Pfluger for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment in the nature of the substitute.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 881, offered by Mr. Pfluger of Texas.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered base text for purposes of further amendments. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is the product of some bipartisan negotiation and a couple of years' worth of work to get to this point. I think we're all deeply concerned about the threat the Chinese Communist Party poses to our Homeland, national security experts, and law enforcement officials have continuously raised alarm bells about the CCP's increasing subversive activities inside our country through organizations like Confucius Institutes and their affiliate groups. While these institutes are presented as centers for promoting language and culture, Chinese language and culture, it is proven that they have been used to steal critical research, recruit talent for military, civil, fusion enterprises, and monitor Chinese national students that are studying at our universities. Today, we are marking up H.R. 881. This legislation would prohibit DHS from funding American universities that host a Confucius Institute or maintain relationships with Chinese entities of concern. It also ensures that universities prioritize the education of their students over any partnerships with these institutes. This amendment in the nature of substitute would add a waiver provision which would require the Secretary of Homeland Security to consult with the Director of National Intelligence and ensure the institution of higher education has the necessary safeguards to protect against any potential unauthorized access to research, data, or development activities. While a waiver provision is included in similar DoD legislation, this waiver has never been used before. And again, this is a bipartisan negotiation. I wasn't in favor of this waiver. We've talked about it. I think that this bill can still continue to move forward and not lose any of its teeth. But should the Secretary of Homeland Security choose to grant a waiver, they must do so after notifying Congress and submitting their justification for doing so to ensure proper congressional oversight. The DHS restrictions on Confucius Institutes and Chinese Entities of Concern Act would play a vital role in protecting our students, intellectual property, and other national security. I want to thank Chairman Green, Ranking Member Magaziner, and my colleagues on this committee for moving this legislation forward. Together, this effort demonstrates our collective desire to protect our nation from the insidious influence of the CCP. And not only did this legislation pass the House last year with bipartisan support, but this year the committee has worked hard to move this forward, to make it a priority. And I urge both sides of the aisle to support this and yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment in the nature of the substitutes?
Chairman?
Mr. Magaziner, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman Green and Chairman Pfluger and my colleagues on both sides for working on this. Listen, the persistent espionage and influence campaigns by the CCP across our country are a real and significant problem. Intellectual property theft is a real problem. It impacts American businesses and American jobs. The CCP is using espionage to steal trade secrets, defense information, and more, including on college campuses. This bill addresses the risk posed by the CCP through their relationships with colleges and universities. Now, in the last Congress, when the committee considered an earlier version of this bill, I was not able to support it. And in fact, I led the motion to recommit on the floor against last year's version because I was concerned that last year's version, because it contains a broad definition of Chinese entities of concern, would essentially have prohibited any collaboration between American and Chinese universities, even on matters that had nothing to do with national security or trade secrets. Arts programs, creative writing programs, etc. Now, we may have had some disagreements about whether that was the case, but that was my reading last year. This year, however, as a result of some really good faith negotiation and collaboration with Chairman Pfluger and between the two sides, I am prepared to support this version of the bill, and I encourage my colleagues to do so as well. Because this year's version includes the ability for the Secretary of Homeland Security to issue waivers if the Secretary finds that there are no national security concerns associated with the collaboration in question between an American and Chinese university, and that the American university has put appropriate safeguards in place to protect any sensitive information. That ability for the Secretary to issue waivers to allow collaboration to continue if that collaboration does not have national security or trade secret implications, that is an important change in my view that gives me the confidence to support this year's version. And because the threat of CCP espionage, influence campaigns, and other malign activity is real and persistent, we should move forward on this issue. So again, it took, I think, a lot of work and a lot of flexibility on both sides to get to this point, but I'm satisfied with the product here, and I look forward to supporting it. I encourage all of my colleagues to do so as well. And once again, I thank Chairman Pfluger and Chairman Green for their willingness to work together to get to a good place. So I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, the question is now on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Pfluger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting the bill H.R. 881 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 2659, the Strengthening Cyber Resilience Against State-Sponsored Threats Act. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2659, offered by Mr. Ogles, to ensure the security and integrity of United States critical infrastructure by establishing an interagency task force and requiring a comprehensive report on the targeting of United States critical infrastructure by People's Republic of China, state-sponsored cyber actors, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ogles, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful to you and the committee for working with me to address the threat posed by advanced CCP-linked hacker groups like Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and Flax Typhoon. And, there's a recurring theme here in the committee as we proceed today on the threat that China poses. And I thank my colleagues for doubling down on this and working together to resolve these issues, because as we move forward, we all know that the existential threat to the United States of America, whether that's our military, whether that's our economy, or again, just our critical infrastructure, is China. The Strengthening Cyber Resilience Against State-Sponsored Threats Act is an important step to confronting the escalating cybersecurity threats we face from the Chinese Communist Party and its state-sponsored cyber actors. We must do what's necessary to protect our nation's critical infrastructure and to hold our adversaries accountable by closing dangerous gaps in interagency coordination. We're not talking about theoretical risks or potential vulnerabilities. We're dealing with confirmed infiltrations of our power grids, water systems, and transportation networks. Volt Typhoon has spent years burrowing into our infrastructure using stealthy, malware-free tactics that may make them incredibly hard to detect. These are not just espionage campaigns. These are pre-positioning efforts designed to cripple U.S. during a future conflict with China. The threat is growing. We saw increased Chinese intrusions in the late 2010s, and in May of 2023, Microsoft revealed the discovery of Volt Typhoon. By August, they uncovered Flax Typhoon. Less than 6 months ago, reports emerged about Salt Typhoon, which targeted our telecom networks, monitoring the communications of countless Americans, including President Trump, Vice President Vance, then Vice President Harris. More typhoons are likely coming. Our federal agencies, CISA, the FBI, and the NSA have each acknowledged the danger, but they've been operating in silos. Without a unified command structure or sustained coordination, our ability to respond is fragmented. This bill fixes that. It establishes an interagency task force led by the CISA director and co-chaired by the FBI director to synchronize our national response. And again, I want to emphasize, when we work in silos, things get missed. Responses are delayed. We've got to work together. We have to acknowledge this threat. This legislation also ensures oversight. The task force must submit an initial classified report within 18 months and provide annual reports for 5 years thereafter. These will include assessments of sector-specific vulnerabilities, the PRC's potential to disrupt military operations, and the economic and social fallout of a major cyber attack. A public executive summary will help inform critical infrastructure operators and the American people. This bill is a statement. It tells the Chinese Communist Party that we are not asleep at the wheel. It tells our allies we take these threats seriously, and it tells the American people that this Congress is committed in a bipartisan fashion to defending our homeland. The cyber domain is the battlefield of the 21st century. If we don't act now, we risk waking up one morning to find our power off, our trains halted, and our communications jammed. Let's stand together. Let's pass this bill. Let's protect the American homeland. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member, you're recognized.
Clearly, we're in agreement on this bill, and we look forward to supporting it. With the cuts CISA is undergoing, I just hope that if we're successful with the passage, we'll have staff to carry it forth. So I look forward to generating the staff necessary to make the bill successful.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I concur with you, sir. Obviously, we're going through that process of, addressing our debt as we move forward. But like you, sir, I do have concerns as we move forward to make sure that any cuts are in the appropriate places. And as we find areas where we need to shore up our defense and national security, then let's work together and make sure that happens.
Look
I yield
forward
back
to it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Both gentlemen yield. Would anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is now on reporting the bill, H.R. 2659, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 2285, the DHS Basic Training Accreditation Improvement Act of 2025. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 2285, offered by Ms. Poe, to require reporting regarding accreditation of basic training programs of Department of Homeland Security and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Poe, is recognized for 5 minutes on her measure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my lead, my co-lead, Congressman Jeff Van Drew, a former member of this committee and a fellow New Jerseyan, for his support. As we prepare to celebrate National Police Week next month, I am proud that the committee is considering my bipartisan bill, H.R. 2285, the DHS Basic Training Accreditation Improvement Act of 2025. As you all know, DHS is the largest employer of federal law enforcement officers and agents, with more than 92,000 sworn personnel. On this committee, we often express our appreciation for DHS law enforcement and honor the sacrifice that they and their families make to help protect our nation. We also do not take for granted the time and efforts it takes DHS to recruit and train law enforcement officers as well as agents. Accreditation of training programs, although not required, is meant to promote high standards and effective use of resources for federal law enforcement. While some training academies, like the Transportation Security Administration Training Center in New Jersey, are accredited, others are not. My bill helps put all of DHS basic training programs on a path to achieve accreditation. It does so by requiring DHS to report to Congress annually on the accreditation status of each basic training program until all are accredited. For training programs not accredited, my bill directs DHS to report the reasons for not obtaining or maintaining accreditation, the activities, if any, taken to achieve it, and the anticipated timeline to do it. It also directs DHS to help state, local, tribals, and territorial law enforcement officers gain better training opportunities, including those that enhance national preparedness and response to terrorism. I am truly grateful for the unanimous support of my colleagues when this bill was marked up by the subcommittee last month, and I appreciate their continued support for my bipartisan bill, which will improve DHS law enforcement training programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Hearing none, are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 2285, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 1327, the Syria Terrorism Threat Assessment Act. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1327, offered by Mr. Luttrell, to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to conduct a threat assessment of terrorist threats to the United States posed by individuals in Syria with an affiliation with a foreign terrorist organization or a specially designated global terrorist organization, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Chairman Green and Ranking Member Thompson, for bringing this bill to the committee today. The last few months have shed light on the political uncertainty Syria is currently faced with. The region remains volatile and has become a breeding ground for violent and extremist groups. The instability has allowed terrorist organizations to establish footholds, exacerbating national security challenges. These malign groups are using every tool at their disposal and sending the bad actors our way. We simply cannot sit back and wait for another attack on the homeland. The Syria Terrorism Threat Assessment Act ensures the Department of Homeland Security conducts an assessment of terrorist threats to the United States posed by individuals in Syria with an affiliation to a foreign terrorist organization or a specially designated global terrorist organization. By doing so, we can better examine and mitigate emerging threats from this region. This assessment is focused on identifying terrorist threats and does not constitute a ban on innocent individuals from Syria. Foreign jihadist networks and other extremist groups are actively exploiting online platforms and other means to remotely radicalize and mobilize individuals to help plan and carry out terrorist attacks abroad. Our mission is clear. We must protect American lives and prevent future attacks on our homeland by strengthening our counterterrorism efforts. Thank you again to Chairman and Ranking Member for bringing this bill up. And I want to thank Congressman Correa for co-sponsoring this with me. And Mr. Carter, welcome back to the committee, sir. It's good to have you. With that, sir, I yield back.
Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question, does anyone else wish to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank both the sponsor and co-sponsor of this important legislation. We have seen a very concerning situation developing in Syria where terrorist entities and terrorist sympathizers are taking charge of not only governmental operations, but also key functions of life in Syria. We see humanitarian atrocities occurring, and it's very concerning not only the on-the-ground situation, but also what those impacts and ramifications could be for American security if those things continue and spill outside of the borders of Syria. And so I think this legislation is very important to address and recognize the situation in Syria, the potential vulnerabilities that could be caused by that instability for America going forward. And so again, would like to thank both the sponsor and co-sponsor for this important legislation and would encourage a yes vote. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank the author of this legislation, Mr. Luttrell, working with me as co-author of this legislation. And let's be clear, today we're looking at a very historic moment. For the first time in 50 years, Syria is not under the Assad family rule. December 2024 marks just not the end of a regime, but it's the opening of a door for people looking for democracy, peace, dignity, self-determination. That's the Syrian people. But as my colleagues have said, the threats are there. What we now face are attempts by that little that's left by the Assad regime, Iranian-backed Hezbollah, ISIS, to exploit the vacuum to regain power. But let's be clear. This legislation, the intent, the focus here is on the real threats, ISIS, IRGC, Hezbollah, and what's left of the Assad regime. We need to continue to send the message to the Syrian people that we stand with them, stand with their efforts as they seek democracy, self-determination, and they seek to get closer to the Western countries. seek to get closer to America. We can't protect our nation while we help the Syrian people rebuild their country. We can reject terror while accepting hope. I hope my colleagues can join me in stating our support for the Syrian people, and at the same time saying we're going to work to make sure America remains safe from any terrorist threats that may come from Syria. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments on the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill. H.R. 1327 of the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 1608, the Department of Homeland Security Vehicular Terrorism Prevention and Mitigation Act of 2025. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1608, offered by Mr. Jimenez, to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to produce a report on emerging threats and countermeasures related to vehicular terrorism and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it's considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez, is recognized for 5 minutes on his measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Green. On New Year's Day, our nation was shaken by a horrific act of terror in New Orleans when an ISIS-inspired attacker took the lives of 14 innocent people and injured dozens more. The individual used a vehicle as a weapon, driving into a crowd on Bourbon Street before engaging in a shootout with law enforcement. This was a calculated and ideologically motivated assault, and it highlights a deeply troubling trend in the United States and abroad in which terrorists increasingly use vehicles to inflict mass harm. In response, I introduced H.R. 1608, the DHS Vehicular Terrorism Prevention and Mitigation Act of 2025. This legislation directs the Department of Homeland Security to address the growing threat posed by vehicle-based attacks. It requires a comprehensive evaluation of both current and emerging tactics, including the potential misuse of autonomous vehicles, rideshare platforms, and connected vehicle technologies. Just as importantly, it would ensure stronger coordination with state and local governments, law enforcement, and the private sector to better protect soft targets, including public gatherings, critical infrastructure, and high-density urban areas. The timing of this important piece of legislation is crucial. The United States will soon be hosting major international events, such as the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup, and the 2026 FIFA World Cup and the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. My hometown of Miami will play a pivotal role in preparing for and hosting many of these events, and it is imperative that you equip the host cities with the tools that they need to make sure our domestic and international travelers are protected. I'm proud that H.R. 1608 is a bipartisan effort. I want to thank Congressman Troy Carter, who represents the very community impacted by the New Year's Day's attack, for his partnership on this legislation. I also want to thank Chairman Green for co-sponsoring this legislation and for continuing to advance thoughtful and strategic homeland security policy. This bill is about honoring the lives that we lost by doing everything we can to protect others, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Carter, you're recognized. And it is good to see you back.
Thank you, sir. Good to be back. Great to be with you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to join Representatives Jimenez and Green in supporting the Department of Homeland Security Vehicular Terrorism Prevention and Mitigation Act, a critical piece of legislation designed to protect Americans from weaponized vehicles on our streets. The need for this legislation has tragically been underscored by the recent terrorist attack in my hometown and District of New Orleans on New Year's Day, which claimed 15 lives and left dozens of others injured. In the early hours of New Year's Day, a 42-year-old U.S. citizen from Texas drove a rented F-4150 pickup truck into a crowd of Bourbon Street in the French Quarter neighborhood during the city's celebration. After crashing, he exited the vehicle and engaged in a shootout with law enforcement before being fatally shot by courageous New Orleans Police Department officers who rushed to the scene, putting their lives at risk to protect others. This heinous cowardice act shattered the lives of victims and their families. It exposed vulnerabilities in our urban security infrastructure and served as a grim reminder of the evolving tactics of terrorists and the potential for more catastrophic methods to be used. This legislation requires the Secretary of Homeland Security, in coordination with other agencies, to report to Congress on the department's efforts to prevent, deter, and respond to vehicular terrorism. This bill also mandates that the report include details such as assessment of current threats, a risk of higher risk location, summaries of actions taken, and recommendations for strategies to combat these types of attacks in the future. Passing this legislation is a proactive step towards safeguarding our citizens from an unimaginable threat. By enhancing our detection and response capabilities, we deter adversaries from contemplating heinous acts in our communities. In memory of the lives lost in New Orleans and in recognition of the ever-present evolving threat, I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Let's honor the victims by taking decisive actions to protect our nation from future acts of cowardice, from future acts of terrorism, and those that would seek to hurt America and Americans. Mr. Chairman, I thank you both. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Consideration of amendment. It's now in order to consider an amendment, Amendment 13 to H.R. 1608, offered by Mr. Jimenez on the roster. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1608, offered by Mr. Jimenez, number 013.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm offering a straightforward amendment to H.R. 1608 that makes 3 small but meaningful adjustments to the text of the bill. First, the amendment updates the number of lives tragically lost in New Orleans days of terrorist attacks in New Orleans from 15 to 14. Second, the amendment replaces the phrase authorized protests with public demonstrations. This change is about ensuring that DHS is considering a full spectrum of real-world scenarios when assessing threats and protecting soft targets. We know that some large public gatherings, whether permitted in advance or not, can draw significant crowds and may be vulnerable to attack. Finally, the amendment includes a small technical correction changing annual briefings to briefing to reflect the intended requirement that DHS provide a briefing to Congress only once. These edits help ensure the legislation is as accurate, thoughtful, and effective as possible. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Hearing none, if there is no further debate, the question is on agreeing to the amendment to H.R. 1608 offered by Mr. Jimenez. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments on the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill H.R. 1608 is amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 820, the Bottles and Breastfeeding Equipment Screening Enhancement Act. The bill was circulated in advance and printed copies are available. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 820, offered by Mr. Swalwell, to amend the Bottles and Breastfeeding Equipment Screening Act to require hygienic handling of breast milk and baby formula by security screening personnel of the Transportation Security Administration and personnel of private security companies providing security screening and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with and it is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, is recognized for 5 minutes on this measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank my former colleague, Congresswoman Katie Porter, who introduced this last Congress, and with the help of the chairman, we were able to pass it out of this committee with a bipartisan vote. I also want to thank California scientist Emily Calandrelli, who has socialized, evangelized this issue with a very touching but concerning op-ed that she wrote about her own experience. Mr. Chairman, as a parent, there are a lot of stressors that you will go through with your kids, getting them up, getting them fed, getting them dressed, getting them to do their homework, getting them to take a bath, getting them to go to bed. We all experience it. But the absolute nightmare of nightmares is traveling with your children. It is chaos taking children through an airport. It's just chaos. For whatever reason, they choose this time to be their absolute worst. They melt down, they're hungry, they don't go to the bathroom when they're supposed to, they need to go to the bathroom when the plane's about to take off. It's a disaster. Compounding that disaster for new parents is the way that we treat women who are traveling with children and breastfeeding. They are treated almost like terrorists. Their breast milk is taken away from them, it's pulled aside, it's tested in front of them, and anyone who's traveled with children knows that the absolute worst time to stop and delay children from expeditiously moving through the airport is at a security line. Backs up the line, they, again, will melt down if they're separated from their mother. It's chaos, it's hell. It's not good for the security officials, it's not good for traveling mothers, it's not good for traveling husbands who will be asked, what are you gonna do about this? So, Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, and with a lot of gratitude to our security professionals who do their best, but I just don't think we've evolved to understand this issue, we have introduced the Bottles and Breastfeeding Equipment Screening Enhancement Act, the BABES Act. It's a straightforward bill that will make traveling with breast milk and pumping equipment easier for new parents and caretakers of young children. The current TSA rules deem breast milk and pumping accessories as medically necessary liquids that travelers can bring aboard an aircraft. However, they face inconsistent screenings and improper handling of breast milk, causing new parents and their babies, in addition to the chaos I just described, a lot of other harms. HR 820 would help address these challenges by requiring the TSA administrator to update or issue guidance to minimize the risk of contamination of breast milk, baby formula, juice, and purified water during TSA screening. It also will have TSA agents, good-meaning, good-natured TSA agents, better understand how to move through faster America's mothers. Another issue that mothers experience, and I hear about this all the time, Chairman, is that working moms who have to go on the road for their work without their children, that doesn't mean that they're not still pumping, they're just not with the children. And so oftentimes they will bring the equipment, they'll go through the screening, and they are asked by TSA screeners, well, if this is really breast milk, like, why don't you have kids with you? The screeners don't know, they haven't been trained, but to many moms, many who are going through postpartum depression, this is a mom shaming, a form of mom shaming where they feel awful already that they have to leave the baby, that they have to work. And I've heard a number of people who have gone through this experience as well. So we can minimize all of this, make traveling a lot friendlier. For anyone who doesn't have kids or doesn't have young kids, you will move faster through the airport because you will not be stopped by moms who are being questioned or delayed by their breast milk being unnecessarily screened. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you again. You're probably asking, like, why am I the one bringing this forward? As I said, I'm living this issue right now myself with 3 little kids, but I'm doing it, as an ally of someone like Ms. Porter and Ms. Calandrelli and so many mothers across America who see this as a bipartisan way for us to just make it easier for trusted moms to travel through our airports. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I recognize Mr. McKenzie for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and would like to thank the sponsor of this legislation for bringing this forward. I think it is a very important issue, and as a dad of a 1-year-old, I am very familiar with this same process that we are going through every time you travel through one of America's airports. And the testimony that he provided is accurate. It's my same experience that all too often the good and well-intended agents of the TSA who are trying to do their job, trying to keep Americans safe and move them expeditiously through the process, are not given the same information, the same level of training, and ultimately that leads to inconsistencies in the process. We've had it where on an inbound and then an outbound flight, you receive different treatment of the same products. And you're saying, well, somehow we made it through the first time without a problem, but here we are coming back, and because of these inconsistencies in training and procedures, you're experiencing a problem and a delay on the way back. So I think it is probably one of many areas that I think could use improvement in training and consistency in our TSA screening processes and procedures, but this one in particular resonates with me. I appreciate the sponsor bringing it forward, and as was stated, it's not only going to improve the traveling experience and process for those of us that have small children, but it's going to improve the process for all Americans. And so I think it's a good thing that we're bringing this forward, addressing this issue, and would encourage a yes vote again. So thank you to the sponsor and thank you to the chairman. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to also thank Mr. Swalwell and, of course, Ms. Porter for this legislation. As a father of 4 children that were breastfed, going through airports, 2 adults, 4 kids, you're playing zone defense, not always successful. To have to go through that security system and explain to those nice uniformed officers what it is that you're doing and why you have those items is a challenge that parents shouldn't go through. So thank you very much. I do hope we can continue to improve security while making sure parents are taken care of. It's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Swalwell. I'll be supporting this legislation. Let's keep it coming. Thank you very much.
The gentleman yields. Would anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question is on reporting the bill, H.R. 820, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, staff is authorized to make any required technical or conforming changes to reflect the actions of the committee today. Without objection, the measures amended during today's markup will be reported to the House in the form of one amendment in the nature of a substitute for each bill. This concludes the consideration of the bills noticed by the committee for today.
Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Clause 2L of Rule 11, I request that members have 2 calendar days to file with the clerk of the committee supplemental, additional, or minority views on the measures ordered reported by the committee today.
Thank you, Ranking Member. So ordered. There being no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.